Welcome back. My name is Carrie. I'm the creator of Psycho-Spiritual Wellness, and that is a path to feeling normal around food using 100% psychological and even spiritual practices. I don't talk about dieting, I don't talk about exercise, not my area of expertise. Eating psychology and spirituality is where it's at. In today's video, we're talking about a frequently asked question: why do I crave sugar after dinner? Why do I always crave sweets after a meal? This is a very common question. A lot of us struggle with this, and I'm going to approach it in two ways. First, I'm going to validate the very real science behind sugar addiction. You are not crazy. Sugar is addicting. Then I'm going to dig into the psychological reasons why we crave sugar after a meal. They are very compelling, arguably more compelling than the science of sugar addiction. So I already believe that you have more than enough willpower to choose not to have sugar if that's not what you actually want. If you're tired of hearing me talk about how much willpower you already have, I'm sorry, but it needs to be in almost every single video I make because it's true. So many of us that diet, we don't relate to this idea. We think that we lack willpower. We think that we are broken. We think that we cannot be trusted around food, and therefore that is why we diet. But I think you already have an enormous reservoir of willpower, but it gets wasted on dieting. I recently updated my article on why diets don't work. It is crazy. I dug into so much clinical evidence. I will link it down below. Our brains are literally wired to fail at dieting. When we restrict our diets and when we trigger famine mode in our brain, our bodies literally release hormones that make us feel hungrier and that make higher calorie foods more enticing to encourage us to eat, but it also slows our metabolism. So then when we do end up binge eating, because for every restriction there's an equal and opposite binge, we eat these foods but with a slower metabolism, and it's just all bad. It's just all bad. So if you want to dig into the really cool science, there's an article on this linked down below. But for the sake of this video, let's just agree. Dieting sucks. It doesn't work. We need to do something different. And just the same, sugar addiction is real. Sugar addiction sucks. We need to do something different. And that doesn't necessarily mean not having sugar. Because to now transition to the psychological reasons why we crave sugar after a meal, not allowing yourself to have sugar is number one. One of the reasons why we psychologically crave sugar after a meal, crave sweets after dinner, is because we're not allowing ourselves to have sweets. Human beings are wired to want what we can't have. So when we make sugar off limits, it heightens our thoughts about it. It heightens our desire for it. And then we end up having it. Just the very act of saying, I'm not allowed to have sugar, puts sugar on your mind. And then it also makes you want to have it more. It increases the fun factor, the excitement around it. So allowing all foods is very important here. And I know it can be scary to give up dieting, give up the food rules, and then also let yourself have sugar. It sounds like a recipe for disaster. But again, I will remind you, the science is very clear. Diets do not work. They pit you up against yourself in a way where you're guaranteed to fail. No one can outsmart their biology. This is why I love to focus on psychology. When I gave up dieting, I was so surprised that there was a day where I was on vacation and I bought a bag of brownies. Brownies are like my favorite sweets by far, that and Sour Patch Watermelon. But I bought a package of like a stack of 5 thick, delicious brownies. And I remember opening them, I broke off a corner and I ate it, and then I got distracted and I moved on to something else. My aunt later came into my hotel room and she saw the bag of brownies that looked like they hadn't even been opened yet. And she goes, wow, you can literally just let these sit here and you're not even gonna eat them? And I was like, no, it's cooler than that. I actually had a bite of it and I forgot about it. So this is coming from someone who used to binge on cookies and sweets at night. This is coming from someone who used to definitely crave sweets after a meal. I will share another story on this very soon. But I just want to show that if you're afraid of giving up the food rules and if you're afraid of giving up dieting, I get it. It was a very scary decision. It's a very groundless feeling, letting go of the food rules. We think it's the only thing keeping us together, when really it's the reason why we're binging on sweets to begin with. So experiment with it. Use the next step to help you gain courage with it. Post-production Carrie here. I'm a dweeb. I made a whole video about craving sugar without even mentioning the fact that I have a whole workbook on stopping sugar addiction. It's called Stopping Sugar Addiction, the Psycho-Spiritual Way. I'm very proud of it. I think it's amazing. And so if you struggle with sugar addiction and you want a very clear path out that has nothing to do with diets and exercise, I highly recommend getting a copy. I will link to it down below. How dare I make a video on this topic without even mentioning it? So the next step is the reason why we're psychologically predisposed to crave sugar after a meal is emotional eating. So this only applies if you haven't eaten enough. So if you have not had enough to eat, the stop, drop, and feel doesn't work, because the stop, drop, and feel is not a form of restriction, okay? It is only a tool to develop emotional awareness and emotional tolerance, the ability to sit still with our discomfort without getting swept away by it. If you're actually hungry, if you haven't actually had enough to eat, it's not going to work, and you should just eat. Now, when you crave sweets after a meal, like dinner, and you had something substantial, and you know for sure that you've had enough to eat, and then you crave sweets, that's a very clear indication that you need to go do the stop, drop, and feel, because chances are 9 out of 10, maybe even 10 out of 10, when you do the stop, drop, and feel, you will stumble upon something juicy. Because whenever there's a desire to eat when we aren't hungry, it's because there's a feeling that we either aren't aware of or that we don't want to feel. When we do the stop, drop, and feel, when we have a craving for sugar or sweets after a meal, we are very likely to stumble upon an uncomfortable emotion. The good news is that once these emotions have the room and the space to be felt and embraced, not resisted, but allowed to be here, they lose their edge. They don't go away completely, but they lose their edge. Enough so that you can access that enormous reservoir of willpower that I've been talking about, and you can literally just choose to decide not to have it. I know how inaccessible that feels to a compulsive eater. It is insulting when someone says, just don't eat, just stop eating. Like, why can't you just do that? It's very insulting and very annoying, because these are the things that are getting in the way. But when we use these tools and we have the courage to sit in our feelings in the moment when we most do not want to, it's a very difficult task, the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, still to this day. That is when we develop tolerance for our emotions, emotional tolerance, the ability to sit still with our discomfort. And then in that place, you can definitely just choose to not have the sweets. So I would like to very quickly share the story that I share a lot, which is when I was first getting started with this work, and before the stop, drop, and feel was even coined the stop, drop, and feel. I had just had lunch, and then I had a craving for Sour Patch Watermelon, my other favorite candy. And in that moment, I just thought that it was sugar addiction, because I didn't know anything else. I was just like, man, I want candy. There's no way I'm hungry, but sugar is just addicting. I just want it. And at the time, I had just been introduced to this idea of feeling your feelings. Say what? So I went to another room, I sat down, and then I started crying. Once I dropped in, I realized that I was really frickin' sad. I will link the video below where I talk about this when it was much closer to that actual moment. But I was sad and I had no idea. So this is why it's very hard for me to explain to someone through email when someone's like, yeah, but I'm just addicted to sugar. Like, I always crave sugar after a meal. I'm just addicted to sugar. There's no hope for me. And it's really hard to explain there's something else underneath, because I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be there, convinced that you're just addicted to sugar because the clinical evidence shows that sugar's addicting and we're all just lost causes. So just try the stop, drop, and feel. Just give it a try. and leave me a comment whether it works or not. I have a lot of faith that it will, so long as you have eaten enough and you're not using it as a form of restriction. Okay, this is the end of the video. I've filmed this 8 times now because it's summertime, it's hot, I have the window open. That means things like helicopters come by. I have 2 neighbors with very loud engines who both came and went during this last hour that I've been doing this. So OMG, we finally did this. The video is done and I'm gonna leave it here. Also, my camera just died like literally 10 seconds ago. That's why there was a cut in the film just now, because it overheated like it has done 5 times in the last hour. So holy moly, this video was a hard one to make. I almost feel like it wasn't meant to be, but we had to make it be because these words needed to be spoken. So I like to get very weird near the end because it's the only time in which I feel comfortable truly being myself. Okay, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, leave me a comment below. I read and reply to every single one. I look forward to it. It's very fun for me. So I hope to see you in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video.